Good afternoon. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee. This is our regularly scheduled meeting. Could be our last in-person meeting for a little while as things are rolling, but we're going to conduct our business. I'm the chair, Camp Gordon. I'm joined by council members Wright, Schrader, and Goodman. We're a quorum of the committee, so we can conduct our business. We actually moved some things off this agenda that involved the community members that would have been coming in here today, so we could streamline it a little bit. There's several items on consent, and we have 3 discussion items. We don't have to discuss them for a long time if folks don't want to, and we can also pull anything off consent if somebody has questions. I'll read through the consent agenda and then I'll move it as a group. I think we're going to have to maybe clarify something about the public hearing scheduled for our consolidated plan, and I'm hoping that the clerk might have a suggestion for us, because holding a public hearing on April 8th, we may have to make some accommodations around that. The first item is authorizing a contract with Property Services and Property Solutions and Services, Inc. This is for providing property management for our emergency stabilization program rental properties. Second item is accepting grants from the Metropolitan Council. Third item is approving revisions to our 4D Housing Incentive Program guidelines. This mostly has to do with allowing them to qualify even if it's new construction. The fourth item is a resolution amending some resolutions having to do with the park dedication fee for the Seward Commons project, and also authorizing extensions of some existing loans. The fifth item's approving our Housing Policy and Development Committee work plan for 2020. And the sixth and seventh item have to do with our consolidated action plan. The first is some budget amendments for the existing consolidated action plan, because we have a little more revenue than we had anticipated. And the seventh item is setting a hearing for our 2020-24 consolidated action plan on the next 5-year 2024 consolidated plan. And the dates may be a little bit confusing there. And authorizing staff to submit the 5-year consolidated action plan to the federal government on April 15th. Now, in terms of setting that public hearing, clerk, can you give me some verbiage that would allow us to also gather the public comment if we're unable to hold a meeting?
Mr. Chair, it's my recommendation that this item be referred back to council, so that at council on Friday next week, council can make a decision as to how it will schedule and conduct the public hearing and in what format. There are potential changes that are being discussed in terms of streamlining the council structure during the emergency that's been declared. And so at this point, rather than this body set a public hearing for a date certain in front of a body that may or may not be meeting at that time, I would refer this matter to the council. The council then can make that decision at its regular meeting on Friday next week, March 27th. And hopefully by that point, we will know with more certainty about what date, time, and body would be conducting the public hearing.
Okay, so with that, I will move the consent agenda, but moving number 7 to refer the matter of the public hearing to the full council meeting a week from Friday. Is that right? Okay. Seeing no comments on that, then all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. Those motions carry then. Then we'll move on to our discussion items, and the first discussion item is the Elliot Twins project financing plan. And Andrea Brennan will be making that report.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Andrea Brennan, Director of Housing Policy and Development in CPAD. There are 2 actions before you on the Elliot Twins project related to the financing for the rehabilitation and preservation of Elliot Twins, a Minneapolis Public Housing Authority project. I'm just going to warn you, my report is a little lengthy because we've had a lot of discussion here about the preservation of public housing. There's a city council adopted and signed memorandum of understanding between the city and the MPHA around protecting folks who live in public housing. And so I want to make sure that I'm presenting sufficient information that all of our bases are covered. So The Elliot twins currently consists of 174 studio and one-bedroom apartments in 2 high-rise buildings in the Elliot Park neighborhood. These buildings were built in 1961. They are among the oldest MPHA buildings and need substantial repairs. In 2018, the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department, or HUD, approved MPHA's application to use rental assistance demonstration, or RAD, at Elliot Twins. RAD is a form of public housing subsidy conversion that will convert the subsidy from Section 9, public housing subsidy, to Section 8, project-based rental subsidy. The conversion to Section 8 provides a more stable funding stream and opportunities to access debt and other financial financing needs to fund needed improvements. This new financing will facilitate the rehabilitation and preservation of the 174 existing public housing units and will also fund the construction of 10 new public housing units. The scope of work includes complete building systems upgrades, including the installation of a sprinkler fire suppression system, exterior upgrades including new energy efficiency windows, roofing, and insulated metal panels, comprehensive rehab of all of the existing units, and again, 10 new units and a new community link building between the 2 high-rises with enhanced community amenities. The improvements will also include improved building security, and energy efficiency or energy improvements are estimated to result in annual energy cost savings of up to 40% and a 50% reduction in carbon footprint. MPHA plans to phase the rehabilitation to minimize the construction impact to tenants. Entities wholly owned and controlled by MPHA will be the general partner of the Elliots, LP, and act as developer and property manager of the site. The project will close on its financing and begin rehabilitation in June 2020, subject to these approvals. A couple of other points on the green aspects of the project. The project will meet Minnesota Green Community Standards, and as well as LEED Silver standards and potentially LEED Gold standards. They're not seeking LEED certification, but that is the standard that they are using in the rehab scope of work. Project financing. The primary financing includes housing revenue bonds issued through Hennepin County, or issued by Hennepin County, including 4% low-income housing tax credits issued by the city, and the $2.3 million deferred loan from the city to support energy efficiency improvements. The funds for this loan were allocated in the city's adopted 2020 budget. The estimated total development cost of the project is approximately $56 million. As I referenced earlier, the city and the MPHA executed a memorandum of understanding that outlined guidance and principles for MPHA public housing finance conversions. The Elliots will use all of the recommended tools for permanent affordability and public ownership and control. First, MPHA is retaining ownership of the land. They will enter into a 99-year ground lease with the project ownership entity, which is Elliott's Limited Partnership. Second, MPHA will retain an ownership interest in the Elliott's Limited Partnership through their wholly owned nonprofit, Elliott's Management LLC, as general partner owner. Through this nonprofit, MPHA staff will continue to manage and operate the property. This will be seamless to the residents' experience. Third, at the end of the 15-year tax credit compliance period, so after 15 years, MPHA has the right of first refusal to purchase the property at the statutory minimum price from the limited partner. Because of this long-term affordability, because of the long-term affordability requirements and the absence of tax credits after 15 years, the limited partner investor generally has no interest in keeping an ownership interest, and so after 15 years, the entire property will be solely owned by Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. Fourth, the financing tools all have long-term affordability restrictions. The RAD use agreement mandates long-term affordability, and the HAP contract for Section 8 has a mandatory renewal requirement in perpetuity. Basically, the Public Housing Authority has to offer, and the property owner has to accept renewal of the housing assistance payment contract in perpetuity. And the use agreement stays in place even if the HAP contract is abated or terminated, unless HUD approves otherwise. The city will have a land use restrictive covenants on the property to secure the affordability requirements under the low-income housing tax credits. And the city's $2.3 million loan will have a 55-year term, which again will require affordability restrictions recorded against the property. The Memorandum of Understanding also establishes expectations for resident protections and engagement. This is, all of the guidance that is in the MOU was followed by MPHA in this process as well. Under relocation, all residents can be relocated on site, so there is no displacement expected as part of this rehabilitation. There are other options available to residents if they prefer, such as staying with friends and family, being relocated to another MPHA unit, or subject to availability, receive an MPHA-issued tenant-based or project-based voucher. Should a resident elect to temporarily move off-site, the tenant has the guaranteed right to return at construction completion. All residents, even if they elect to stay on site, and we've been told that most of them want to, all residents will sign the relocation plan that MPHA developed with residents, and residents had legal representation from legal aid in reviewing and advising on this contract. This relocation contract between MPHA and the residents state all of the protections, including that the rent calculation for residents will continue to be what it is, 30% of income, as it is now. Residents will not be rescreened and will not lose eligibility during this conversion. And there are many, many other protections that are outlined in that agreement. In terms of engagement, residents have been informed and engaged in the design and scope of work process, as well as the relocation plan. That is I think the main substance of the actions that are before you, which is approving basically host approval to allow Hennepin County to issue the tax-exempt bonds for the project, and then the approval of the $2.3 million loan on behalf of the city. So I would be happy to take any questions that you have.
I don't see any questions at this time. I really appreciate that basically all the protections of the MOU are put in place there. I think this land trust idea, that they're holding the land with MPHA, and also the long-term agreements and kind of covenants to keep it affordable are really critically important to this. And I'll note that I've said many times that if MPHA can prove that they can do an effective job with the Elliot twins, it will really go a long way in terms of demonstrating how they could be successful with other rehabilitations of other property in the future. So appreciate that. I will move these items forward for approval. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a note of this. The Elliot twins was a property that was in the 7th Ward for a long period of time prior to the redistricting, and has been ably represented by Councilmember Warsami ever since. I think this is one of the most unique properties within the portfolio because of its age, and also because it was a high-rise built downtown at a time at which not a lot of high-rises were being built other than public housing. This is an incredible community of people who have come to this location from all over the world, and it's one of the properties where these kinds of improvements have been made despite the ongoing drumbeat of all the horrible things that potentially could happen. This building believed in all of the positive and hopeful things that could happen as a result of a renovation of their homes. No one living in the building will be displaced, and people who live in these two buildings know that, and they're confident of it because there's been incredible communication from my colleague at the other side of Elliot Park. So I think this is a really great project. I'm happy the city is able to assist with the bonds, and hopefully there will be other projects like this where residents believe strongly that their homes can be improved, they will not be displaced, and that they get truthful information from their council member and from the Public Housing Authority. And so I'm really happy about the way this panned out. It's very important in the Elliot Park neighborhood that I also represent that people who live in public housing keep their housing and feel confident about it. And there is no doubt that that's happening with the Elliot twins. So congratulations to you, Andrea, as a member of the Public Housing Board, and for all the work your team has done on this project.
Seeing no further discussion then, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? That motion carries. Now we'll move on to item number 9. And Andrea Brennan can also present this, and you could probably take as much or as little time as you want to talking about this pretty unique and fantastic report.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. What I'm happy to report is that now, through our legislative information management system, we have a report that is available. Here's a cover of it I'll put up here that is available to the public that highlights the core values that we use in doing our housing work here at the city, as well as the 7 specific strategies that we are employing to implement Minneapolis 2040 and our goals around housing. This report is 13 pages and includes some highlights on some key progress that has been made under the 7 strategies that we are employing here. So that is available to the public and can be used. And then the other this is going to be really hard to read, but I just wanted to point it out. And again, this is also available through our legislative information management system online that anyone can access. And this is a document that is called the Minneapolis Affordable Housing Continuum. And what it does is it has this row, the top row here shows different sort of income groups. So the income increases as you move to the right. And then the different colors represent here the 7 different strategies that the city is employing. And then underneath, there are all of the different specific initiatives and programs that are color-coded to the strategy that they fall under here. So that this is sort of like a snapshot all in one place, which we've never had before, that highlights the housing strategies and the different programs and how it all fits together and who's served under these different initiatives. So I wanted to report that these are both available. I also do have a more in-depth presentation that goes through the actual progress that's reported in that report. I would be happy to do that now, or if you'd prefer that I could do this at any time in the future. And also, I know I'm starting to get some requests, me and folks from my team, to do this presentation out in the public too, and we're really excited. At the point when we start doing public meetings again, we're really excited to get this information out there in that way as well. So
I think you could go ahead and run through the slides. How many slides are there? I mean, you don't even, if you don't know, you don't have to even tell us. But I think
I can be very brief and highlight.
I think we'd appreciate seeing them, and we're certainly on track to have our meeting done in plenty of time. Councilmember Gooden.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Ellison and I were just talking. I mean, this is a massive effort that has taken a really long time, and I wonder if it's going to just be lost in a room full of nobody other than us with some people. I feel like we should have this presentation, but it should be after we get back to normal operations, because it's a lot of time to ask our staff to be here, but also it's not going to get the recognition that staff deserve for all the level of work that's been done. People are thinking about why we're sitting here right now so close to each other. If they're watching this, we're asking our staff to be here for this presentation, and it's certainly not going to be heard by people in the housing area when we're worried about whether or not people at homeless encampments can wash their hands. So I'm not sure really the information gets out by doing it for us here today. But I'm happy to sit here and hear Andrea speak for an hour if everyone else wants to.
Well, we thought we could give kind of a tease and a brief presentation, but I also wanted to make sure to take the temperature of the committee. I'm also hoping that this will set us up for a report for the next year as we're tracking it like this. And it's really been a challenge to try to convey and communicate with folks all the work that we're doing around housing and affordable housing. So this has just been a great effort, I think, to kind of show that and put it in a brief report and even try to put it in one visualization. So I think that's pretty impressive. But Councilmember Ellison.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight that this is a huge deal, and I do want to make sure that it gets the recognition that staff deserve. That doesn't mean that it's like, depending on how long, if there's a 3-minute version or 5-minute version, I think I'm happy to hear that. But I don't want us to get a full presentation and then we're going to get minimum recognition. And I think that what I'm hoping and based on the check-ins that I've had about this report with Andrea and her team, this does look to answer a lot of the questions of like, what is our housing strategy, and should be a platform for us to ask really great in-depth questions and really vet the document as well. And I do feel like with everything going on that this isn't the best time for this to get full recognition. But also, I know that I was late because I was responding to constituent concerns, and then I'm used to my staff knocking on my door, and I was like, oh crap, we got to get going. So I've got a lot of other things on my mind. I'm sure everybody's got a ton of constituent concerns that they're addressing, and I feel like we're not going to. I wonder if we'd be able to even give this presentation our full attention right now. So
Okay, well,
Chair.
that's probably enough for me to take those two comments. Councilmember Schrader, did you want to also weigh in as well?
Well, I think the weighing in has happened, so I think I'll just want to thank the team, and I'll thank you more when we do a longer presentation. But I would also just say, like, that chart alone is amazing and just represents hours and hours of work. It is so useful. If we're going to have an hour meeting on that in the future, I think that'd be fantastic.
Well, no one should complain then if this comes back later. And if we take, I guess, an hour is now okay. So should I take that as a motion to table it in committee, or should we say postpone, or
Mr.
can we
Chair,
just
I would-
receive and file and then bring it back brand new?
Having consulted with Mr. Frank here on the side, just briefly, I understand the committee is very interested in what is a significant and substantive amount of work from staff on a very high priority for council. Given the fact that we are considering changing the structure of council, there might be additional time available within its schedule, notwithstanding the declared emergency, which would allow us to give the proper recognition of this subject matter. We could call and schedule a meeting with just this as the subject of the agenda, such that even other council members could participate. The public could be duly notified that this was the only subject of the meeting. If that's the pleasure of the chair and the committee, certainly the staff have put a lot of time into the presentation, and Mr. Frank assures me it does take the time to give it the recognition that council members have said it deserves. We could happily work to do that.
Well, then let's just move to receive and file it, but we can expect we'll be looking at it again, either in this committee in the future or in some other way soon. But
Right.
Thanks so much for all your work. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries, and now we'll move to our final item on the agenda, which is confirming the appointment of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority Board of Commissioners designee, or appointment of Abdi Warsami as Executive Director of the MPHA.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Under the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, the City Council is required to confirm the appointment of the Executive Director of the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. This is the requested approval before you today. Greg Russ, former Executive Director of MPHA, resigned in August of 2019. Since that time, MPHA Deputy Director Tracy Scott has served as Interim Executive Director. A search process for a new MPHA executive director began in September of 2019, conducted by Cohen Taylor search firm, and a search committee comprised of 6 members appointed by the MPHA board chair, Shamarki Issa. And those 5 members included Shamarki Issa, Judge James Rosenbaum, Councilmember Cam Gordon, myself, Abdi Salah from the mayor's office, and Tamir Mohammed, a public housing resident. On January 29th, 2020, the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority Board of Commissioners unanimously approved Abdi Warsami as Executive Director of MPHA and directed staff to move forward with the appointment process in accordance with local, state, and federal requirements. This included seeking a waiver from HUD to the 1-year prohibition on hiring an elected official. After a 6-week review, HUD granted this waiver to MPHA on Thursday last week. In its waiver letter, HUD determined that good cause exists based on the fact that MPHA undertook a deliberative effort to conduct an extensive search process with an independent third party for a viable candidate. And through this search process that included community input and support, Mr. Warsami was chosen as the best qualified candidate. Upon receipt of this waiver, MPHA Board Chair Shamarki Issa sent a letter to the City Council requesting that the City Council take action to confirm Mr. Warsami as MPHA Executive Director. There is a lot more detail on the search process in the staff report and the attachments. I'd like to highlight that Cohen Taylor conducted discovery meetings to understand key competencies required for the role of Executive Director. Cohen Taylor had phone or in-person discussions with more than 50 key stakeholders and sent surveys to MPHA employees and a random selection of 500 residents of public housing and 500 participants in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. All public housing residents were invited to participate in an online survey. Candidates were evaluated against the attributes identified through this discovery, including the top 3 attributes that emerged from the resident survey: commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, ability to serve as a trusted and credible leader, and strong communication skills. The search committee found Mr. Warsami possesses all of the desired attributes defined through the search process. He holds a master's degree in business and developed strong financial acumen from working in the private financial sector, leading nonprofit organizations, and serving as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee of the City of Minneapolis. Mr. Warsami has held leadership positions in large and complex organizations. As executive director of the Riverside Plaza Tenants Association, Mr. Warsami led a team of 30 staff and represented more than 5,000 tenants. Mr. Warsami has demonstrated effectiveness in navigating complex political systems and improving established systems to better serve the people they are intended to serve, especially low-income, immigrant, and racially diverse communities. Mr. Warsami brings to this role valuable lived experience of growing up in public housing and professional experience advocating for low-income renters. Mr. Shamarki Issa, the MPHA board chair, was not able to be with us today, but I do see that, Abdi Warsami, Mr. Warsami is here as well. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
I don't see any questions, but I also extend the invitation to Mr. Warsami to address us if you'd like. You're invited to come up and say a few words about your plan.
Thank you, Chair Gordon and council members, for giving me this opportunity to speak here today. I'm tired, scared because of the unprecedented times that we live in right now, but I appreciate coming in front of the council. It's strange being here in front of you, but I'm very passionate about public housing. I grew up in public housing. I think my lived experience gives me the greatest attribute more than my competency for the role. I thought about what are the main things that I want to bring to this reputable agency, and I think the agency needs a fresh start. There's a great deal of fear with regards to the residents. There's a great deal of apprehension. People don't understand all these RAD and Section 18. There's a huge campaign going on with regards to people are going to be laid out, they're going to be homeless, that somehow the city of Minneapolis is privatizing public housing. And for me, public housing is a great asset. It's a key city infrastructure, as important as our water, as our parks. But I don't think we give it that kind of importance. And that's what I want to bring to the table. One of the things that I'm going to work on early on, apart from this COVID-19 crisis that we're happening, and the fact that folks that live in public housing are the most vulnerable members with regards to this virus. I think we have an emergency at hand, and overcoming the emergency, I think the three things that I want to work on is, one, that there is no involuntary displacement of residents with regards to redevelopment. And we're going to test case the Elliot twins. And I think making sure that the Elliot twins goes well will give people confidence that we can develop and make sure that folks are not displaced. The second thing is making sure that we preserve every unit that we have. And the third thing is building new units. I think we're not going to be able to overcome the challenge of affordable housing in the city of Minneapolis if we do not invest in public housing, if we do not make sure that public housing is a key to all the things that we're going to do forward. But I also don't think that there should be fear of using all the tools that we have available. For example, RAD is a tool that was developed by HUD. Section 18 is also a tool that's developed by HUD. And I think those tools could be used in a way that makes sure that we develop the units, we preserve what we have, but we make sure that the folks stay where they are. And as somebody who worked on and crafted the MOU between the city and MPHA, I know that MPHA has allies in terms of the city. I know many people, every single council member cares about public housing. Every single council member wants to make sure that public housing is successful. And I'm going to go to MPHA with that in mind. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity. I do need your support, and I do need you to confirm me today. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer them as well.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions, but really appreciate you being here, and I think that the council shares those priorities with you. Not that I can speak for everybody, but sometimes I try. Any discussion on this? I will move this approval forward. Councilmember Ellison.
I will support your motion. Just wanted to say a few things. One is that, it's gonna be odd seeing you on the other side of the dais, but I'm excited to see you sort of take the reins, and it's exciting, with the interim, Tracy Scott, seeing a black woman step into that role, seeing a black Muslim step into the role as the director is exciting for me personally. I'm sure exciting for everyone. I think that's awesome. As elections chair, I don't look forward to yet another election that we've got coming up. I'll be working with Casey on that. But just wanted to name my gratitude and thank you for stepping into this role. And then also just wanted to say, I think that we've got a decent, line of folks who have now been at the helm of MPHA, and that's really exciting. And I know that Tracy Scott couldn't be here, but just wanted to recognize her work as the interim. And if anybody sort of had a question about her caliber, I know that she was just named the director of public housing in the city of Chicago, which is exciting. And I think that sometimes in that interim role between full-time directors, or she was the full-time director, but I think sometimes in that interim role, folks don't get their full recognition. And so I hope that we can all recognize just how good of a job she did in the interim role. And during a tumultuous time that now Mr. Warsami will inherit. So just wanted to also name that, but excited to support the motion.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And seeing no further business before us today, we are adjourned.